Miles away from his elegant estate, 78-year-old Matthew Evans sat alone in his luxury silver Mercedes, drumming his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel. The Kentucky sun bore down harshly, and though the air conditioning struggled valiantly, the heat still crept in. A retired tycoon who had built his fortune in the finance world, Matthew was used to convenience things going his way with a phone call or a check. But that afternoon, with a deflated tire and no cell reception, he found himself at a rare disadvantage. He had tried calling roadside service, pacing beside his car in frustration, only to find no bars on his phone. With a resigned sigh, he climbed back into the driver's seat and leaned his head against the headrest. That's when he spotted someone in the distance. A boy, likely around 13 or 14, was walking along the roadside, his sneakers scuffed and shirt faded from too many washes. The kid's pace was steady, purposeful. As he neared the car, he gave Matthew a nod and asked, "Flat tire?" Matthew exhaled sharply, half relieved, half embarrassed. "Yeah. I've been stuck here a while." "No signal?" The boy didn't hesitate. "I can help. My granddad taught me how to change one last summer." He knelt down beside the tire, inspecting it with calm confidence. Matthew motioned toward the trunk. "Tools and a spare are in there." Without further words, the boy retrieved the jack and tools, then set to work. He was quiet, efficient. Matthew observed with a sense of humility he hadn't felt in years. The boy didn't ask for anything, didn't try to impress, he just focused on getting the job done. In 10 minutes, the new tire was on. The boy stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and gave a satisfied nod. "You're good to go." Matthew reached into his wallet and pulled out a few crisp bills. "Here, I appreciate it." "Really?" But the boy shook his head politely. "That's kind of you, sir, but I don't need anything." "Glad I could help." Before Matthew could respond, the boy turned and walked away, the road stretching behind him. Matthew stood motionless, hands still outstretched with the money, feeling oddly shaken. He climbed back into his car, but as he drove off, the image of the boy's steady walk and humble refusal stayed with him. That evening, in the quiet of his grand study, surrounded by antique books and fine leather chairs, Matthew sat deep in thought. His dinner sat untouched beside him. He'd met thousands in his life, clients, executives, politicians. But that nameless boy had left a mark no high-level connection ever had. There was something about that moment, help offered without expectation, dignity without wealth, that gnawed at him. It wasn't just the kindness, it was the authenticity. By morning, Matthew couldn't shake the feeling. He needed to know who that boy was. He returned to the stretch of road where they met, asking at gas stations and diners. Most had no idea, until a cafe owner paused and said, "You might mean Elijah. He's always lending a hand around here. Lives over in Harlan with his mama." "Harlan," Matthew repeated, mentally noting the direction. An hour later, he arrived in the small mountain town of Harlan, where the Appalachian hills framed rows of simple houses and quiet streets. After a few more inquiries, he found himself outside a modest home on the town's edge, paint peeling, porch slightly sagging, but everything neat and cared for. Matthew hesitated, then knocked. A woman in her 40s answered, her tired eyes scanning him with curiosity. "Can I help you?" "Good morning," he said gently. "I believe I met your son yesterday." "Elijah, he helped me on the roadside. I wanted to thank him properly." Her face softened into a smile. "That sounds like him. Always helping someone." She stepped aside. "He's out back. You're welcome to say hello." The home inside was cozy and lived in, decorated with family snapshots and drawings clearly made by a younger Elijah. It felt warm, not in the way wealth insulates, but in the way love and resilience do. Out back, Elijah was hammering a loose fence board. He looked up, surprised. "Oh, "Hey," he said. "Didn't he expect to see you again?" Matthew smiled. "I had to come. What you did yesterday, it meant a lot more than you probably realized." Elijah shrugged with a modest grin. "It was nothing. Just a flat tire." Matthew's voice caught a little. "It wasn't just the tire. It was the way you helped. No hesitation, no strings. That's rare." Elijah leaned on the fence, brow raised slightly, his young face thoughtful. "My granddad used to say, if you can help, you do. No scoreboard. Just do right." Matthew stood there, quiet, humbled. A boy with hand-me-down clothes and worn sneakers had taught him something that decades of high finance hadn't. For a long moment, neither said a word. The boy's calm, unshaken presence made Matthew feel oddly unsettled, as if he were the one being evaluated. "I don't think you understand how rare that was," Matthew said at last, breaking the silence. "Most people don't help strangers unless there's something in it for them." Elijah blinked, his head tilting slightly in quiet thought. "I guess I don't really think about it like that," he replied. "If someone needs a hand and I can help, why wouldn't I?" The simplicity of that answer hit Matthew harder than he expected. He glanced beyond the boy to the backyard. The fence, patched together from different kinds of wood, wobbled slightly in the breeze. The grass was thin in places, and a rusted swing set stood leaning to one side, its chains clinking softly. This family didn't have much in terms of wealth, but there was a quiet strength in how they held everything together. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," Matthew said sincerely. "Your mom must be proud." Elijah smiled and looked toward the house. "She works a lot. I just try to help however I can." Matthew was quiet, his mind drifting. He thought back to his own childhood growing up in a small, cramped home, watching his parents hustle to make ends meet. Somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with that version of himself, swallowed by boardrooms and stock portfolios. But standing here in this yard, surrounded by modest things, he felt a powerful wave of remembrance and regret. "I'd really like to do something for you. For both of you," Matthew said finally. Elijah straightened, a trace of caution in his expression. "That's kind of you, sir, but we're doing all right. You don't have to." "It's not about whether you need it," Matthew said gently. "It's about what's right. You helped me when I was in trouble, and I want to return the kindness." Before the boy could answer, the screen door creaked open. Elijah's mother stepped onto the porch, drying her hands with a dish towel. "Elijah, come in and wash up before lunch," she called, then noticed Matthew and offered a warm but surprised smile. "Would you care to join us? It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome." Matthew paused. He wasn't used to casual invitations, especially not from strangers. But something about her tone, sincere and unpretentious, left no room to decline. "I'd like that," he said, stepping up onto the porch and following her inside. The kitchen was small but inviting, with the aroma of fresh bread and roasted vegetables filling the space. The table was neatly set, despite the worn furniture and mismatched chairs. Matthew took a seat, his crisp, tailored suit out of place among the humble surroundings. Elijah washed his hands and sat down, his easygoing smile never fading. As they began to eat, Matthew found himself pulled into their world, into the stories, the laughter, and the little moments that felt so rich in meaning. Elijah talked about school, his interest in machines, and dreams of one day becoming an engineer. His mother spoke about their neighborhood, the people who helped each other out, and the quiet pride of making it work with what they had. Matthew listened, captivated. He realized how little he had felt this kind of warmth in his own home. For all his riches, there was no laughter echoing off his walls, no real conversation over a meal. When they finished and began clearing the table, Matthew turned to Elijah's mother. "You've raised a remarkable son," he said. "He has more character than most grown men I know." Her eyes glistened, and she smiled softly. Thank you. It hasn't always been easy. But we've learned to find joy in the little things. Matthew nodded, a quiet plan forming in his mind. He didn't want to impose, but he couldn't just walk away. What they had given him was more than a repaired tire, it was perspective, a kind he hadn't realized he'd lost. That afternoon, as he drove back to his sprawling estate, Matthew felt something shift inside him. This wasn't about pity or charity, it was about honoring that boy's selfless spirit, and the quiet strength of a mother who raised him with values more precious than anything money could buy. The next day, Matthew began making calls to builders, architects, suppliers, and a few old contacts from his business days. By that afternoon, a plan was underway. Within a week, trucks began pulling up to Elijah's home. Workers unloaded lumber, tools, roofing materials, and more. Matthew stood nearby, clipboard in hand, overseeing the work with careful attention. Elijah and his mother stood on the porch, speechless. You didn't have to do all this, his mother finally said, her voice shaking as she watched the renovation begin. We've gotten by just fine. Matthew turned to her, his voice calm but full of conviction. You've done more than just get by. You've built something here that money can't buy. The least I can do is help make it a little easier. You didn't just survive, Matthew said, his voice quiet but firm. You've built something out of nothing. But you also gave me something I didn't even know I'd lost. Let me return the favor. Elijah stood silently beside his mother, his gaze thoughtful and steady. Matthew bent slightly to meet his eyes, his expression sincere. You taught me something important, he continued. Helping others isn't about money, it's about being there when it counts. I want to be there for you. In the weeks that followed, Elijah's home underwent a remarkable transformation. The sagging porch was rebuilt with solid beams. The leaky roof was repaired, and the backyard's rusted swing set was replaced with a sturdy new one. Inside, the worn walls were freshly painted, the floors sanded and polished until they gleamed, and the outdated kitchen was fitted with sleek new appliances. At first, Elijah insisted on helping hauling wood, sweeping up sawdust, but Matthew gently stopped him. Your job right now, Matthew told him with a smile, is to enjoy being a kid. Still, Elijah couldn't help but linger nearby, eyes wide with interest as he watched the construction team work. He asked questions, followed their movements, and soaked in every step of the process. One of the workers, a stocky, good-natured man named Joe, noticed the boy's curiosity and invited him over. Want to help me measure these boards, he asked. Before long, Elijah was right in the middle of it, learning how to read blueprints, handle tools, and cut wood under careful supervision. His enthusiasm was contagious, and the workers welcomed him like a little brother on site. From the sidelines, Matthew watched with quiet pride. It had been years since he'd felt this kind of purpose, something more than numbers and reports. Watching Elijah reminded him of the passion he once had, long before life narrowed into profits and prestige. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the final touches neared completion, Elijah and his mother stood on the new porch, gazing out in awe. The once worn-down home now looked warm and full of life. This isn't just a house anymore, Elijah's mother said, her voice catching with emotion. It feels like a home. I don't even know how to thank you. Matthew shook his head, his voice soft. You already have. You reminded me of what's important: family, community, meaning. I should be the one saying thank you. The final day of work felt more like a celebration than a construction job. Neighbors wandered by to admire the changes. Some brought gifts: loaves of fresh bread, jars of jam, even a small potted plant for the porch. Laughter filled the yard as Elijah raced through the grass with his friends, proudly showing them the swing set and the newly painted rooms. Matthew leaned on the porch rail, taking it all in. For the first time in years, he felt genuine happiness, simple, unfiltered joy from seeing a family thrive. Elijah's mother joined him, handing him a glass of iced tea. She smiled warmly. "You've done more than fix up a place," she said. "You gave us something to look forward to. You brought hope. And maybe, you found something too." Matthew nodded, taking a slow sip. "I think I have," he said quietly. "I spent so long chasing money, status, the next big deal, but none of it ever made me feel like this. This means something." As the sky began to shift from golden to deep orange, Elijah bounded up the porch steps and looked at Matthew with a thoughtful expression. "Mr. Matthew," he said, slightly hesitant. "I've been thinking about everything you did. And I think I want to do something like that when I'm older. Help people the way you helped us." Matthew rested a hand on the boy's shoulder, his tone steady and warm. "You already are, Elijah. You started all of this with one small act of kindness. Never lose that." The three of them sat together, watching the sky deepen with color as the day faded into evening. There was a quiet warmth between them, not from the sun, but from something deeper. A shared understanding. Gratitude. Purpose. When it was time for Matthew to leave, Elijah and his mother walked him to his car. The boy's wide grin and his mother's emotional smile stayed with him long after he pulled away. He knew then that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far more meaningful. In the weeks that followed, life continued to evolve. Elijah's curiosity for building deepened, and Matthew made arrangements for him to shadow the same construction crew that had transformed his home. Elijah learned quickly, asking questions, taking notes, and dreaming bigger every day. As for Matthew, he found himself returning to Harlan often. Each trip felt less like a visit and more like coming back to where he belonged. He wasn't just an observer anymore, he was part of something real, something grounded in heart and humanity. And for the first time in a long, long while, Matthew Evans was truly at peace.